So if I'm in Sydney and Brody's in Portland, and Tyler, you're in Minnesota.
Minnesota, USA.
Is it cold right now?
This season or this winter has been unseasonably warm. We got a little bit of snow this afternoon, but we literally have like a dusting on the ground. So it's below freezing, but pretty balmy for us actually.
Bro,
it's balmy. Like it's 40 over here, and I'm like, please, someone call the cops.
It's a balmy sub-zero winter. That is really funny. Because I was going to make the joke because I'm in Australia, obviously, so we're in summer. And I think I made the joke last time about every time I say it's summer for Christmas, everyone in the States sort of loses their mind. Like, I don't understand. But Brody's losing his shit. In the same country.
Well, I think in context, it was just the fact that he used balmy as the descriptive word.
That's funny. And he's in the traditional Minnesota flannel. It's beautiful.
I'm on brand. Just be consistent, right? That's all you need.
That's it. And with that, we're going to talk about violence, Misfits. So Brody, roll those credits. From Sydney, Australia, all the way to Portland, USA, two misfits hang out after class to riff on the B-sides of professional life. These are your professional misfits. All the way from Sydney, Australia, I'm your host, Christopher Sellers.
And from Portland, Oregon, I'm Brody Ipox.
And we're your professional misfits, where we riff on the B-sides of professional life. And today we brought in another misfit, all the way from Minnesota. Say hi, Tyler.
Hello, everyone from Minnesota, USA.
So Tyler's today, folks. It's season 3. It's episode 8, and today we're talking about violence. Excuse me. We're talking about violence, and is violence ever an answer? And I thought this would be a really, really interesting conversation to bring in Tyler as ex-military, now turned pro-security, and founder and principal of Winsley. So, Tyler, do you want to give us a little bit of background on you, your expertise, where you're at, and just sort of your jam on LinkedIn as well?
Yeah, so I started on LinkedIn about 3 years ago, and fast forwarding, or I guess rewinding far back from that. So I grew up on a small family farm in North Dakota, and then I joined the Army. So I was in the Army like 5 days after I graduated, and between active duty and then National Guard and Reserve, I ended up spending just short of 21 years in the Army combined service. I retired like right at the beginning of the pandemic. So it was a good time to retire. But because I was a reservist for the latter half of my career, I first worked as a paramilitary and did some overseas embedded work as a paramilitary, and then also in the U.S. Between training opportunities and some training support stuff, and then transitioned into corporate security. So I've worked for a couple of large global firms, and then here this last quarter, a couple of months ago, really I decided to take a shot on myself. So I founded Winsley, which focuses on some traditional consulting, but really based around operational intelligence-based approaches to like corporate function, and bringing some of those best aspects of like military decision-making process and intelligence processes to a commercial setting. And then also, because I'm a little bit of a linkster like you guys, I also am launching a B2C offering, which is called LinkedIn Tradecraft, which is applying some of those same operations and intelligence-based principles to LinkedIn context, to where it's not a course on content writing or how to engage or hack the algorithm. More so, it's kind of end-to-end full spectrum operations for LinkedIn to become a better content contributor, add value to the network, and also kind of learn some of those human hacks to make you more effective on the platform. So really looking forward to launching that as well.
And
That's
you
awesome, man.
climb mountains and do ultra marathon in your spare time, just like Paul Watkins. You and Paul are always geeking out over mountain climbs and extreme ultra marathon snow shit.
Paul's like my big brother, man. He's up here, and I'm still down here on some of the objectives, but yeah, he's the real deal.
Both of you
cool.
guys with the cold weather stuff, though. I mean, fucking count me out. Oh my god.
It's such a bromance. It's great. I love it. All right, lads. But the reason we're here is we're talking about violence, and I think it's really interesting to get three men together to discuss something objectively. So, is violence a necessary evil? For instance, is it, and is it inherently a male problem or a male issue? So these are some things that we're going to get into on today's episode. But here's a quick question before we get started. Is like, do you know what the definition of violence is? I'll throw this to the room. Brody, I'm pushing you under this bus.
No, and you know I don't. You're a jerk.
I
told him that I didn't know.
I think specificity is interesting. Tyler, actually, do you have any, or what would be your interpretation of violence specifically?
Oh man, I kind of put it into two buckets, honestly, between like societal violence and what we view as violence from a societal perspective and how that changes over time, as opposed to from our more primal selves in a physiological sense. Because I think those are really kind of the two key arguments here. It's like, we can say that, oh, violence is never good and just be kind. Yeah, but unfortunately, the world isn't kind. And when you get kind of more of those elemental things, violence is inherently part of like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and security and, physiological needs and then security. So when we take away all of our LinkedIn accounts and our flannel shirts and all of that other stuff, I mean, you're just trying to eat and get by. So I think people need to take a step back from what some of our constructs are, our social constructs of what's absolutely virtuous and acceptable versus, how do you carry on your bloodline, right?
Really good point. Really good point. All right. So for everyone here, the definition, the dictionary definition of violence is behavior involving physical force intended to hurt, damage, or kill. So that's the specific dictionary definition. But I think, like Tyler mentioned, like we can all recognize instances outside and around of this which we would deem violent. So here we go. Is violence a necessary evil, Brody, or is it evil? And I'm going to come to you first because you've recently just hooked up with your local fight club. So are you a violent dude? And are you and other violent dudes just hanging around beating the shit out of each other?
You would frame it like that.
Got to give the guests some breathing room so they can process their thoughts, whereas you should be on the ball, my man.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Look, I'd say this. I don't think, like Tyler said, there's an inherentness in violence that I think is primal. I don't think it's evil. I think it's primal more than it's evil. And I think it's really easily misconstrued given how individual the effects are given the circumstance, generally talking about violence. The way that you brought it up, that's kind of, to me, that's the safest place for violence. If there's a place that you can kind of craft yourself into a weapon and you understand the bounds in which you're capable in that realm, I think you're less likely to use them. I think when you know the impact of a right hook to someone's face, you're not just going to go throwing them. It hurts. It has an impact. It jars somebody. It's it kind of, to me, to learn it, it's necessary to be involved in it is really where I look at that. So I'm not sure that the act itself is necessary. I don't disagree with people that deal with things peacefully. But again, cycle back to another thing Tyler said. I mean, we've got to survive, and I do want to carry on my bloodline. And if there's something that stands in my way that would trigger a violent response, I think that I'd be apt to listen.
Yeah, I think knowing, this is probably something I'll get to later after Tyler, your response, but it's knowing when violence is appropriate and when it isn't. And to your point, it's like the uneducated, the uninformed, the reckless fucking idiots, like it's the first thing they reach for, right? It's the first intimidating tool. It's the first response. It's the only answer. But if you happen to be educated, skilled, more to the point, and we'll get into this, is that you can recognize and discern what is a threat, what isn't a threat, when it's appropriate, when it isn't, and how to scale appropriately. Like in my civilian view. So Tyler, in your professional view, like how do you think it's necessary evil? Do you think it's necessarily primal, not evil? Like, or is my interpretation and assessment accurate, or is it a bit naive as a civilian living in the blanket of democracy?
Well, I think the first part of it is, and when Brody was kind of responding, it got me thinking about this, and really to your question, Chris, if all the combatants involved are willing actors, does it cease being violence? Right? If you have soldiers on the battlefield, yeah, you could say it's violence, but is it really as distasteful when it's soldiers on a battlefield as opposed to civilian population, where I think most people agree it's like that becomes a bit more egregious when you're attacking unarmed people or like in a battle space context. So I think that there's that part of it. I mean, as far as whether or not violence is ever okay, I mean, I spent 21 years in the most effective military in human history, so I think I'd probably be a little bit of a hypocrite if I said I wasn't at least somewhat okay with the concept. But there again, too, it's really situational, and it's about context of the situation, right? Of when is it appropriate to project violence, and to Brody's point as well, if you're disciplined and skilled in the projection of force and violence, it does a couple of things. It enables you to exert the appropriate amount of violence to mitigate the situation, right? And also the ability and means to project violence inherently reduces the potential for violence in a lot of situations. I mean, Brody and I live here in the U.S., and although we've been attacked, we don't get attacked very much, and there are some pretty specific reasons why. And it's our ability to project force quickly, globally, and swiftly.
Yeah,
I'll chime in there with a personal anecdote just to sort of bring it back to the individual as well. So anyone who's been listening to any of the previous episodes knew that school and high school is pretty rough for me. So bullied pretty badly, and that affects you in all sorts of different ways. And one of the habits and one of the techniques that I learned as a young adolescent man, then operating socially, is any party, any club, any house party that I would went to, you sort of immediately walk in and you would assess the room. Who's loud?
Sizing them up. Yeah, you're right.
Well, as a survival mechanism, you had to. It was like being the one brown kid for some reason was different and always kind of got singled out for something. So who's big, who's loud, who's got the most groups of friends, who drove what, who's drinking, so you basically conduct a threat assessment as you walk into the room. And then rightly or wrongly, I would mitigate my behavior as to not piss off this guy, not get too close to them, not talk to that one's girlfriend. So you start to modify your behavior based on what's in the room. Then when I started training, and I started training in Kung Fu at about 19, and sort of was teaching beginners by 6 months and running the school within 2 years. So my uptake was fairly quick. But the point is, once I started to become skilled, cognitively something happens, and this is sort of to your point, Tyler, and what you were saying before, Brody, is that the perception I had of the world changed. Because now when I walked into the club or walked into whatever house party, no one was a threat because I could handle myself. I could handle myself with bigger guys. Sparred with 2 or 3 at once. So there was a level of competence and security. So it wasn't that the world shifted and that violence evaporated. It's that my scope and capability changed, and that altered my entire perception of the world and the way that I moved within it. Yep. And this specifically goes to what you were saying, Tyler. It is interesting that once you become skilled in anything, in this case it happens to be violence. The guy who taught me would always say, like, violence is a language, right? If someone is speaking violence to you, you must be able to identify it and like reciprocate and translate in turn. Like conflict resolution outside of the office, there's no such fucking thing, right? And even if we go to the gross point of actual engagement of war, or actual combat, or actual getting into a fight with the locals at the bar on a Saturday night, more often than not, it's the threat of violence. It's the classroom bully. It's the toxic coworker that like loves to assert some sort of dominance and authority over you, and that's more oppressive and more of a threat, I'd say, in societal life than specific violence or anyway. That's my hot take. Brody, you're nodding. You can chime in here.
Yeah, well, I mean, it falls back to what I said. I feel like throughout the experiences of my life and instance I've had where violence has served me, it didn't come until after I had some sort of training. It didn't come until I had some sort of resistance against myself in that kind of field, that it was eye-opening, right? Like the same way that you're talking about. You walk into a room and the threat level changes, or you understand that violence isn't always necessary because, I mean, he just irritated me. I'm not going to break his jaw because he irritated me. Like it doesn't equate. The consequence doesn't equate for the action, right? And it's just, to me, it just becomes the untrained eye. So it's like you're talking about that guy has arrogant strength, is what I call it. I think there's a ton of dudes out there like that. Yeah, you might be able to throw a punch. You might be strong, but it's arrogant. There's nothing trained or disciplined about it. And if you came across someone that was trained and disciplined, your arrogance does nothing. You lose almost every fucking time.
This is right. And so this is where I want to pose something as well, because there's a great line. One of my favorite movies is Man on Fire. Denzel Washington, Dakota Fanning.
Great movie.
In there. Great movie. And Denzel's teaching Dakota how to swim. And she's tiny, she's complaining. She's like, oh, but they're bigger and they're stronger and all this sort of stuff. And Denzel makes a point. He's like, no, you're trained or you're untrained. So which are you? And he's like, trained. He's like, all right, so back in the pool. And this is what they drive. And here's something I want to touch on as well, because normally violence is associated with men. Men are the oppressors or the instigators. Men are also relied on to defend us and keep everybody safe. The bigger they are, the more violent they're assumed to be, or the more aggressive, or the more capable. And again, with a little bit of training, I've come to understand that, no, you're just big. Skilled.
Happens a lot.
Yeah, skilled, muscles, size, 5 or 6 of you, it doesn't matter. Trained will beat untrained 99% of the time, in my view.
Mm-hmm.
Tyler, step in as the security expert, bro.
Yeah, so I want to ask. Can I ask you a question to two people that are coming at violence kind of in a, I would say, in an uneducated form, as you are educated? Do we sound arrogant? Do we sound ignorant? Does it sound off base? Or is it something that violence has kind of got a common language, right? That where it's like just talking about it and getting to know someone's view of it, we kind of all have a common perception here.
Well, so I think, violence is an endeavor just like any other, right? whether you're trying to figure out, how to post content on LinkedIn or get better at podcasting or whatever, violence and fighting or combat are no different. So yeah, if you have a trained individual and an untrained individual, the probability is extremely higher that a trained individual will prevail. There are always instances where something could happen, and you do have those true freaks out there that it's just in their DNA and it comes naturally to them as well. So I think that there's that component, but certainly I think having training in defending yourself, it just like anything else, it's beneficial. Because Chris, I was going to ask you the question. You were talking about your instances in high school where you go to a party and you do a quick like scan of the room and kind of do your risk threat assessment, and then you learn kung fu, and now things that your bucket of things that used to be a threat got a lot smaller now. But I bet you still apply that trade craft of when you go into a room, you assess situations. And Brody, you probably do as well. So I think it's a situation where it's not like you're trading one for the other, right? As opposed to you're just adding to your skill sets, right? So it's like, I still know what's up when I go into a room. I know that I can handle myself with 99% of the people on the planet, right? I still sit with my back to the wall when we go into a restaurant, and my wife knows to take the entrance, and some of those things just happen. I've softened a little bit with age to where I don't always back my car into a spot, but when I'm in a traffic, I make sure I have enough space to boogie out and jump a median or whatever I have to do as well. So I think it's a situation of where the more you start to get trained in something, whether it's violence or self-defense and otherwise, it really just makes you more cognizant to the risks, I think. And again, you're more likely to mitigate those things. And so I think that the more people who are reasonably capable, it makes for a better behaved society, I feel.
That's a really good point. And it sort of brings something up as well from what we've been talking about, is that I suppose the perception of violence and sort of falling into the male bucket, or even, I suppose, Tyler, the military.
Toxic masculinity, let's say it, right?
Well, things like that, but also the military, because it's assumed that if you join the armed forces sort of in any capacity, then you're joining because you want to play with guns and shoot people. And from a civilian point of view, it's, and then even from an Australian point of view, looking at America, that's sort of something else entirely different. But just like turn that up to 1,000. But because I've had a little bit of experience working with operators at different levels, some in intelligence, some in the police force, and basically anyone that carries a firearm. And there seems to be that equivalent for the layperson, for civilians, that violence equals guns equal violence, therefore people who have guns are violent and predominantly they're men. So I'm wondering, how did this fall to be a male responsibility, I suppose? And why is the view of violence so skewed perhaps on the female side of the fence? Because often when we talk about, toxic masculinity and violence, it often goes with domestic abuse and sexual assault and these sorts of things. And therefore that's proof that men are inherently violent. And this is sort of what we're discussing, sort of pulling apart what's assumed, and what violence is, what's assumed about violence, what's assumed about men and violence, and why it's not just this in the evil bucket. Does that make sense?
It does. I think it's in our chemical makeup. Again, it's in our DNA. You look back to tribal cultures or the animal kingdom. It's like this stuff all exists. I mean, there's context out there now with primates and past civilizations, and we just happen to be in a culture now where maybe it's in some ways a little bit tougher to be fully masculine to our genetic makeup, because we've gotten to a point where the constructs are such that I really have to mute who I am, because now that's viewed as bad if I'm too assertive, if I'm too aggressive, if I'm too direct or whatever. And so I think that's where, I think that probably there's an opportunity just even for not necessarily a reset, because society is going to society, right? And it's going to think what it's going to think, and it's going to do what it's going to do. But at the same time, it's like, take a moment of pause into someone's situation and into someone's life, and, and also into their genetic makeup. And it's like, there are certain things that are fundamentally and foundationally a part of who we are. Why do you think everyone loves to sit around a campfire? It's not a coincidence. It's like violence, in a sense, is kind of like that. Obviously, we know that we live in civil society, so we can't just go and burn down the countryside, and we can't just go and exert indiscriminate violence on people, but it's all part of our DNA.
Brody?
I'm not far off. I mean, it's like you said, my instinct when you said that was to chime in right there and be like, look at biology. I mean, and this again, you and I have had this conversation on multiple episodes. I think there's strengths and weaknesses in both sexes. And I think that the point of the sexes is to be complementary, right? And I'm not going to assume that a 5'5" woman at 125 pounds can do the same damage that I can at 6'3" and 210 pounds. That's just like it's doesn't make sense. The math doesn't math, right? Like, and you look at it like that, that's when, to me, it's like Tyler said, if we just took a step back, you'd realize that really none of this shit is actually toxic. It's biological. It's some of the things that, and I'm not talking about misogynistic behavior. I'm talking about what we're talking about. It's biological. When someone threatens me, like he said, I think I'm geared more towards a fight response than a flight response than most people are. And I will stand, and if I have to fucking punch you in the face, I'm going to punch you in the face. Like, I'm wired differently. I'm built differently than others. And I think that is a biological thing for me. I don't think it's necessarily just a choice. I do think I play a large portion in honing that and also using it, but I don't know. That's just me.
Okay, so I'll challenge it because that's my job, and I know I have a different point of view. See, I wonder. Look, I wonder if it's so much genetic.
It's my job.
Well, it's my job, and it's who I am. But it's like it's also. I wonder if it's genetic, because I really do challenge shit like this, where it's just in our DNA, because it's the same dude bros that get on different podcasts and go, hey man, like, it's in my DNA to spread my seed and like to fuck every girl out there, because monogamy is just for me, because I'm just not built like that. And it's normally some banker bro. And I'm like, cool, man. Like, have you learned philosophy? Have you learned mathematics? Have you learned science? Did you appreciate anything about art? None of that's in our DNA. None of it. So we've learned it over time, and we've learned it, how to apply it, and what its benefits are, what the skills are. So all this shit you can learn. But then when it comes to like respecting women or being monogamous, all of a sudden it's just primal and I can't fucking control it. And I call bullshit. Back up. I'm not done. And we're having the same discussion here about how like violence may be a primal thing because we can trace it back to cavemen, blah, 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 blah. But with skill, and I'm going to also say mentorship, because it normally requires someone older or senior than us, like, to guide us on the skills, the appropriate use of force, when to use it, when not to use it, and all these sorts of situations. So I would more make the case that humans have evolved as a social species, right? And within social dynamics, whether we like it or not, there's always an undercurrent of hierarchical structures and power dynamics. Mm-hmm. Children will play for dominance over other children, like irregardless of gender. Like, girls will push over little boys to get the toy they want and then turn around and tell them to shut the fuck up. And that's not gender specific. And so as they age, as they mature and hit adolescence, behaviors tend to change. But what we can all agree on is that boys are socialized in violence. understanding that if we disagree, this could end up in a punch on, and the threat of violence and the threat of it's
But
a
is that
language.
not the biological response?
That's what I mean. I don't know when I question it, but
Okay.
the assumption that it's like hard coded in one's DNA, I don't know, and I'll always question shit like this because it's the same thing that people say. Well, creativity is genetic, and I go, no, creativity is skills. And the same thing here, violence, but like he's bigger and he's stronger. No, 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 no. It's skills. It's skills. And for background, the style of kung fu that I trained in is Wing Chun kung fu. And if you know anything of the history, um, Wing Chun was one of the only martial arts ever founded by a woman, and was named after her first student. So Yim Wing Chun. So it was a Buddhist nun who named it after her first student, and there's a fun little fancy story that goes with it. But the point was, this was a style specifically developed by a woman because they realized that size and strength were two things that were going to fade over time as I age, but also men will have more of. So how do I design a system that compensates for people of overbearing size and strength?
Redirection,
So,
right? If I'm not mistaken.
a lot of it is, and biodynamics and a whole other thing. Now, the point is, it's not super important what style it is because you can train in anything out there and you can become competent and you can have confidence and you can learn skills. That's the main thing. I guess my point is this it's always fascinated me. This is what it gets down to. It's always fascinated me the female view of violence, perspective of violence versus the male lived experience. Because, and this is what I'll get to, is like, where is violence inappropriately used? You know what I mean? Because we're talking philosophically about the nobility of men and and it's in our genetics, but there is mountains of evidence to suggest where violence is misapplied incorrectly or poorly or immorally, and that's something we can't not address. So, because if it's genetic, if it's in our DNA, then that kind of excuses domestic abuse and it excuses sexual predators, which we're not about to do, I know. So
Right.
where do we draw the line in terms of ethics and responsibility?
So do you think there's, because you talked before a little bit about the divergence, and I would agree with you, Chris, that at least growing up as an American kid, there are certainly patterns that you start to get socialized in about what sports you should go into and, you know, how dads play with their kids or whatever else that you're socialized to. And, but you talked about it, and it kind of made me think a little bit about how little girls are basically out there, and their behaviors and their conduct, children at play, are in a lot of cases indistinguishable, right, between girls and boys. And then you said, and then that changes as they get a little bit older. So, but there again, don't you think that there's probably some component to the chemical influence that starts to happen as boys grow into men and girls grow into women, where, I mean, we're getting shot full of tests essentially when we hit our teens, right? So I think that there's that influence. Not to say that's a, like, you use the term like the banker bros, that it's just in my DNA, so whatever. So obviously I don't agree with that, but again, I still think that there is a physiological component to it. Not to say that it's a pass to function as a productive member in civil society.
And I think we all agree that, like, it may be a factor, it may be a percentage, it's not 100%.
One, it's not a pass. It's not a pass on bad behavior. I mean, don't.
Right.
And
so,
that was what I was going to say to you, Chris. I was about to make a fart noise into the mic, bro. Because, like, again, under that same consensus, when I say it's in our DNA, right? You get that small, and I genuinely think it's a small percentage of people that go, oh yeah, and it, like Tyler said, it becomes a pass, like an actual fucking physical pass I can hand you and say, this is okay. We're cool. I can do this because it's in my DNA. Then you have people that are a little bit more fucking involved and go, oh shit, because I know that, I now have to distinguish when it is and isn't okay, right? And that's what we're talking about. Is that the situation? Is that the individuals? Is that the environment? What, when do you condemn, right? Like, because again, I do think inherently, and especially talking about male violence, there is something within testosterone, within the male psyche in general, that's geared towards ambition and competition. I think it plays a huge part. I think it plays a huge part. And to say that it doesn't, to me, feels like I'm choosing not to look at that.
No, I question it. I
Okay. Okay.
question the veracity, and normally it is a pass. It's like a pass on, like, boys will be boys, like, but it also compounds negatively, because it's the same crowd that's like, well, girls mature faster and they're more emotionally in tune than boys, because boys are only interested in right. And now that
Okay.
really pisses me off, because genetically they're like this, and I'm like, no, no, like, we've also learned since the 80s and 90s that young boys and men are incredibly emotionally in tune, except one's been told you don't feel things, boys don't cry, and the other one hasn't. So again, I'd question if one was raised in a sort of environment. If boys were raised in emotionally healthy environments where they could express themselves, anger, frustration, and therefore violence would arguably be less common. And like this misspent violence is what we're talking about. We're not talking about trained, specific use of. We're talking about the kid that fucking lashes out, throws chairs, punches the walls, breaks shit because they can't reason, with themselves.
Or hasn't found a productive outlet in lieu of
1,000%.
basic violence, right?
1,000%. And for how many boys out there was boxing the answer? Like,
I was just about to say, I mean, like, that's the Fight Club for me, like I'm not there in any incapacity to hurt anybody or do damage or necessarily even to be violent itself. It's just the outlet that it provides and the like-mindedness of people that are willing to go to that space with me it's different, it's different.
Here's a fun question then. Do you think in the age of UFC that violence has been glorified? Like the
It always
male
has. It always has. I mean, fall back to the Colosseums. I mean, look at the gladiators. I mean, and as much as a large portion of the gladiators did that unwillingly, right? It was still the spectacle of, like, we've always enjoyed the spectacle of violence, which to me, again, I don't know if that's a genetic thing. I don't know if that's a consciousness thing. I don't know if that's a human thing. I couldn't answer it for you, but I do believe that violence for a large portion of human history has been glorified. Absolutely.
I mean, one can't overlook how translatable it is to so many different people, right? Like around the world, regardless of your upbringing or your social norms. It's like you brought up the UFC analogy, and Dana White has said it many times. He's like, fighting is just something that everybody gets, and I mean, there is some truth to that. I mean, there are a lot of different people who look at the morality of the UFC and what it's doing to our society, a little bit differently. I used to watch it a lot when I was younger, and now that I've gotten older, I just don't so much. Not out of any sort of moral disagreement, but just, I guess, getting into my 40s and some of my tastes are just changing. But I think there's something to be said for, you have warrior cultures and you have fighting that resonates with people and they understand it in every corner of the globe. So, again, I would maintain the point that I think that there is something that's within us that's not entirely taught around violence, I think.
Like we don't have all the information about it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think the note that you brought up on warrior culture is really interesting, Tyler, because again, historically, if we look at the roles of men cross culturally, it's normally two roles and two roles only. It's warrior and provider, and all the great, maybe scholar, maybe, but warrior and provider is, even if you're a scholar, you need to provide and protect for your family.
Yeah, half the scholars were warriors and providers, right?
Right. And so, and this, historically, this seems to be in place. And so, all the great legends are written of which, and movies are made of such. And so this kind of gets back to what we were talking about in the beginnings. Like, the one thing I took out of training, I suppose for me, it was the ethic, though. Like, that was my approach to it. It wasn't about to kick ass and be a badass. It was to be the best that I could be. And via this medium, I will take this as far as I possibly can to excel. And that's an ethic I've applied to everything that I've done since then, probably because of the confidence I built to be shown it was possible. Do you know what I mean? And the one thing, and this was, even though it's sort of cross-cultural here, I really appreciated the metaphor of the samurai, because it wasn't just like, yeah, you can handle a sword, but sure, they were also poets, and they also studied, and they were educated. It was this holistic pursuit of excellence, rather than
artists and farmers and
all of those things. And again, it was always what we've talked about here, is it's a case of, like, you walk softly but you carry a big stick. It's like, no one in the street, no one ever knows.
Well, it's the Chinese proverb, right? It's better a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
100%, 100%.
Principle.
And it's sort of, it's kind of an irony, because when you started training, you're kind of itching to test yourself, and you never get the opportunity. And then my teacher was absolutely fucking right. He's like, you don't want to fight people. You never want to fight people. It's like, the one thing about a fight that you can predict is it will be entirely unpredictable. So you want to control everything that you can, but unless you absolutely have to. And that's, again, like an ethic that I took up until to this day, so there's an essence of, but do you think everybody grasps that? Do you think the idea of a warrior culture and like a male pursuit and this? No?
No.
I'll go to Tyler first, because surely the military draws those sort of bros. Surely.
So I think that people who have had experiences with it probably start to understand the concept a little bit better, because even on the best day, a fight is never fun. Like even if you don't get stitched up, it always hurts. It's never fun, right? So
and it's terrifying, and yeah.
Right.
That's one thing that nobody else admits. I don't give a fuck. I've been in plenty of fights. I've been scared every fucking time. I've been scared.
Yep. Never fun, ever. So I would say that, particularly now that, from a U.S. perspective, like, we're kind of not quite so much at war after a couple of decades of being at war, where, a lot of people in my cohort serve a majority of their service and total careers within a wartime military. So I'm starting to see, I guess, a lot of guys probably similar age to me now that are separating from the service. And because of social media, you have some more people who are present on the platform and even starting to leverage their past experience for their next thing with coaching and whatever else, which I resemble that fact as well. So, but you see a movement too, to where a lot of these guys, there are some people that are starting to embrace that poet warrior type of mentality. And so I think that there are some people that truly follow that path the right way, as far as trying to be a holistic person, not denying your past and not just denying your skill sets, and maybe what you bring to the table, but then also embracing some other stuff. So, I share a lot of my life, like through LinkedIn, as most of my content is very much day in the life, and I try and have some useful information there. But, one day it could be out on the mountains. Maybe the next day it's a military analogy. And then maybe the next day I'm pissing around, canning some tomatoes, and like, that's real me. And I think that there are other people who have separated, who are starting to do those things in their own unique ways as well. I'm sure you guys can list off, guys and gals on LinkedIn that you see that serve, that also are more holistic and talk about some other things as well. That said, I think there are probably, well, I know there are, I'll never name names on this, but there are definitely some folks out there that served and they want to get onto the, I'm an ex-military, now I'm a life coach to executives and all of this other stuff. Some people are a little bit better equipped for it than others, but I think they try and say, oh, I'm poet warrior, but they really are still broed up, and it's not necessarily, because they saw that there's like a commercial opportunity associated with being a warrior that's now an outlier and you're doing your own shit. But I think that in some of those cases, you can see like the guys that were probably the bully in the high school that went off, they were in the military, they kicked ass and took names. And now there's, oh, I'm holistic now, but you can't even get your arms down far enough to walk through the door. And it's not, and it's not because you're that swole. So I think you have the full gamut of people who are trying to jump in on the trend culture for commercial value, because they say, oh shit, it's actually cool to be a poet warrior now, which I think that it is. And I would commend society for that, and saying, it's okay that we respect people who served, and they're real people with real lives. They're people with real struggles. They have mental health issues. They have challenges with their family, all these different things. But then I think you have another group who try and play to that role as well. And I am a bro, but I'm a poet warrior now, and I'll see you in Valhalla and a lot of this other stuff. And it's like, and some of those dudes, I just don't agree with it. So.
Yep.
It's interesting hearing you speak on it like that. And it raises the question in my mind, and maybe this is a little far off, but I feel like it's something that we need to touch on, what the kind of individual impact of violence has been. Like for me, there's been multiple times where I mean, for example, I've been beat down, like I've had my ass fucking handed to me. And it's like you said, Tyler, number one, that's not fun. Like I didn't enjoy getting my ass beat,
Sorry.
like holy, no, you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
But it did something to my mental more so than the physical, right? Like, and I feel like a lot of people don't talk about that. It's like you've recovered. And I feel like this happens for the guys in the military all the fucking time. They get home, the wounds heal. You should be good, right?
PTSD is definitely a thing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I mean, on all varying degrees. You get punched. I'm telling you. And fuck, dude, take a 10-year-old kid, take him to fifth grade, take him to middle school, have him get punched in the face, and then see if anything that comes near his face doesn't make him flinch.
Yeah.
That's a fucking psychological response. And it's crazy that as much as we have talked about the philosophy of all this, that's one of the things that we haven't talked about, is what does it do? And even more so, getting hit and then hitting someone. Because man, I've also hurt somebody and really felt fucking shitty.
Yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, I did say, Tyler, just before you came on, I said, I've got a handful of questions here, but I know this is going to like roll for 2 hours if we don't like curb it. but what you raise as well, what I immediately think of is, what's a woman's perspective? Because we're talking about it as men, sort of, a little bit skilled, a little bit experienced, a little bit tasted this and that. For a lot of women, it's just the perception of, this could happen to me from any man at any time, at any moment, right? Which I would tend to draw the parallel to Chris in high school before he trained, is like, you perceive a lot of threats that may or may not necessarily be there, but that's the reality that you live in right now. And that's a whole other episode for a whole other time. But I agree with you 100%. Like, I scraped through primary and high school like brawling with kids because I fucking had to. Like, well, I would get picked on to a point where you're surrounded by 6 other boys and one guy's pushing you, and you have there's no flee option.
Nope.
So you had to fight. And luckily I didn't get too badly damaged and whatever else. The one time, funny, you mentioned this. So the one time I got into like a proper fight, and this is where, even when I was trained, this is where the difference between theory and practice literally punches you in the face. So I was flashback to my hometown of Newcastle, flashback to Derby Street, flashback to, there's an art gallery there by Civic Park, and it had a giant concrete, it was Pebbles car park. Anyway, so I'm walking back from Goldberg's, which is my favorite cafe, at about 10 o'clock at night. I'm going to get the train. I'm going to go home. I see a dude with another guy in a headlock. And the guy in the headlock is screaming like, fucking let me go, fucking let me go. And so I'm about 20 meters back. And of course I pause to go, the fuck is this? You know, the guy in the headlock sees me, says, what the fuck you looking at? He starts running at me. So then it's like, fuck. Then it's like a movie, because I'm standing here like sort of with a journal in one hand, Walkman in the other, kind of watching this guy run for 20 meters. And in my head, I'm going, the fuck are you doing? Like, don't you know who I am? Like, rah, rah, rah. He skips, he lines up a punch. And the last thing I remember thinking is, fuck, that's slow. And then he goes, bam, and like clocks me straight across the temple. And so then I go down, he bails up on top of me. Then he's screaming, fuck him up. I see 2 other guys jump out of the car, and the guy that had him in the headlock start running across the car park, right? That's when the switch flicks and goes, Chris, 4-on-1 in the middle of Civic Park, you best do something about it. So turn around, bail this guy up, like hit him like 2 or 3 times, like chain punches. He falls straight to the ground, like spitting teeth and whatever. I turn around to square up to the other 3 who were sprinting across to fuck me up. All 3 of them stop and skate across the pebbles in the car park. And they're like, what the fuck are you looking at? I'm like, bro, I'm trying to catch a train. Like, what the fuck? And so long story short, I walk off, they pick their boy up, whatever. I get home, I did have a black eye, motherfucker. Did have a black eye. My parents, being my parents, take me straight to the police station, make a statement, you were assaulted. I'm like, okay, fine. So go and do all of that. So like you're saying, didn't get the shit beat out of me, but my reality of I'm trained, I'm capable, and then I let a guy sprint 20 meters across a car park and punch me in the face because I froze. Completely panicked.
Yeah.
And just took it. And then was lucky I didn't get fucked up, right? Really lucky. The postscript to all of this is after they take the statement and whatever, a few days later, Sergeant such and such from Wallsend Police Department calls me and says, we have a guy that matches your description. He was admitted to hospital with severe concussion, a whiplash, and compound fracture. The attending at the ER thought he'd been in a car accident and his head had hit the dashboard without a seatbelt. What do you want to do? And I went, no, it's fine. Thank you very much. Just kind of hung up. So again,
don't call me back. Don't call me back.
Right. But it was the consequences as well. Like, so first it's the rude shock of training versus reality, and that little bridge of panic and what the fuck do I do? And then being able to handle myself, and then getting that call, and then living with the consequences of I asked mum, because she's a medico, like, what's a compound fracture? She's like, that's when the bone comes through the skin. So hit him once, the jaw dislocated, hit him a second time, it cracked and came through his skin. I'm like, fuck. She's like, yeah, he'd have his jaw wired shut for months. I'm like, fuck. So terrified that I was in a fight, kind of proud that I handled it, annoyed and embarrassed that I had a black eye, then actually sort of terrified and regretful that what I can do genuinely damaged another human.
Yeah, it's kind of
But it was in self-defense.
Net loss across the
Right?
board. Like nobody wins.
Yeah.
Right. But, but was in self-defense. So it's trying to reconcile all of that as one person's personal experience with probably the one and only real adult fight that I've been in.
Yeah.
As a civilian, like operating in a professional capacity is something else entirely.
Well, I mean, look at what detail you're able to recall that with, you know what I mean? And that's what it says to me. And that's what it says to me with, the psychological impact. And it brought up a lot for me where I was thinking about stories that I could reference, and they're right there. You can taste the blood in your mouth. You can fucking feel the chipped tooth. You can feel your dislocated shoulder. It's fucking there. Like it's such a physical thing that I think that.
And it's all over in the matter of seconds.
Oh, it's so funny that you said that shit where it's like, oh, that's slow. I remember the first fucking time I got into a fight, I thought the same thing. He was getting ready. Am I Peter Parker? Am I gonna? And then just fucking smacked right in the face. And you're like, holy shit. Okay. I mean, I don't know what happened from here to there, but yeah, it's just interesting. And again, I think it's something that's not talked about a lot. And I wonder if, specifically for guys in heavy combat experience and things like that. And again, weird too that you brought up the female perspective, because I wonder how far off that baseline of cortisol or chemicals that keep you alert and kind of focused and scared are in those two kind of instances, whether there's some correlation to those things. Trauma is a fucking shitty thing, whether it's getting punched in the face.
Some of it's even contextual between genders. Like, Chris, you got me thinking about it a little bit earlier. And then Brody, you were just kind of mentioned it again about, well, how does a woman feel about it, knowing that, they're kind of going to be in situations where most women are going to always be in a situation where, 99% of men can exert violence onto them fairly efficiently. And I mean, it's hard for us to kind of think about it from that context. Like, and I think about like my wife, and obviously she's co-signed into all things that are me. And of course she's cautious. Like, she's not going to go out and take ride shares at night or certain things like that. So I'll give her a ride, like if I have to pick her up or whatever. And so her risk assessment's a little bit different than mine. And I understand that for some of those reasons. And at the same time, because of my background and my capacity and training, she also doesn't see that as a bad thing either, right? So it's kind of all a matter of context there.
Yeah, fair, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think it's really, really interesting dynamics overall. And again, I think it's bringing it back to sort of the social and even work aspects of things. It's knowing. The funny thing is, outside of that instance, like every other sort of confrontation or whatever can normally be de-escalated, or you call them out for who they are, and nothing happens. The amount of times a guy told me like, step outside, and I'm like, I'm right here, bro. Like nothing happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you're laughing. Yeah.
Or you want to go, and then you hear people saying you want to go back and forth for 10 minutes. It's like, I don't think anyone really
is holding them back, and really nobody's actually making any effort to make it to the other side.
It's like nobody really wants to go here. Why can't we just sort this out?
Yeah. And again, that's a quantum leap from like who I was before, like even to who I am now. Because you can, it's hilarious.
Well, like if you think about it though, like the want to go, or do you want to step outside, or you want to go culture. If we think about it that way, it's almost like an extension of past societal constructs that may force us into that, because now it's like, well, shit, I have to want to go. Even if I don't really want to go, I want to go. Do you want to go?
Like how
because
how
otherwise my friends are going to think that
the
I
boys
didn't
are going
want
to
to
think
go.
I'm soft. The boys are going to,
Right.
It's okay. This is the last story, I promise. But it's the last time that happened. I was sitting at a cafe. It was one of the few cafes in Sydney. It was open late at night, and then this younger girl who I knew from just being a local, she was getting harassed by some of the like local fucking just hood kids. So she came and sat with me. And precisely to your point, it's like because the girl left those boys and came and sat with the other guy, then like fuck it, man, you got to step up. And so these three punk kids come over, like literally just standing around the table trying to stare down. And I stood up and I'm like, can I help you? And like something, I can't remember, it's talk. I do remember there was three of them. I do remember the first kid was standing in front of me, and I couldn't even remember how far away he was. And because he was holding a glass bottle. And his friend was trying to come around here. It's like, I can see you and you're holding it in your right hand and you're too far away. So you have to take a sweat. You can only swing at me with your right. This is over before it even starts, kids, But again, a quantum leap from like 19-year-old Chris. But you can remain completely
Yeah, just imagine
composed.
if you'd said you want to go instead of can I help you?
and that was the thing. They're like he was trying to talk shit. He was trying to talk shit and he's like, come down the alley. I'm like, buddy, I'm right here. Like what and there's three of you. What do you want to do? And it's
I don't want to stay here because we're getting down to the wire here. But listen, that's one defense mechanism that I picked up real quick is I understood that I was willing to swing, right? There's not a lot of motherfuckers that are. There's really not. So you get good at talking your shit and you fucking stand in your shit. 9 times out of 10, you're probably not going to have to swing in your shit as well, But if I swear to God, it's a fucking male thing. The second you come off to me as you are scared, I fucking won. I won. I fucking won. You're scared of me. I have a fucking advantage and I'm going to fucking use it.
So apart from bros being bros, here's an anecdote that I do want to end with because I think it's really interesting. Is like in the Germaine Greer, seminal Australian feminist, in her book The Female Eunuch, again seminal Australian feminism book in the 70s, makes this point actually about violence and sort of along the lines of violence being a language. Is because no one will pick a fight that they know they can lose, and more often than not, it's someone is testing whether I can beat you or not. And she made the point about Jermaine at one point was dating a guy that would lean this way. If he didn't get his way or if she misbehaved or something, he would attempt to threaten her in such a way. And her response was, and then what? So you can beat the shit out of me in this kitchen. And then what? Like, I'm still not going to do whatever it is that you want to do. And so as a woman, and arguably as an untrained woman, she was sure enough in herself to determine that this course, this pathway isn't a resolution for you. So what else do you have? And I always thought that was utterly fascinating because once you can
powerful.
Once you can show to someone that this isn't an option, this isn't viable, this isn't going to get you what you want, and like she never ended up beaten, not to say that that's the perfect solution, but that's why I find this topic specifically fascinating. And that's why I find it specifically fascinating to talk amongst the three of us, and I knew this would go longer than it should.
I think it's
Tyler,
just long enough.
Just long enough. Tyler, thanks for being here, even though you're slightly under the weather. And thanks for letting everybody know. It's been a real pleasure and a real insight to have you on the Misfits. If folks want to grab a hold of you, where's the best place for them to contact you?
LinkedIn, and more LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. No capitalization, a lot of blue dots. some crappy
A
copy.
lot of
Some
emojis.
crappy copywriting.
No, well, I think it's working for you. I wouldn't label it as crappy, my friend.
Look for the guy in flannel. Look for Tyler and the profile shot of him in flannel. I think
And
you're
like
black
you
and
said,
white now. It's very classy.
he'll either be on a mountain or he'll be canning something in his kitchen. So
That's
you'll
it.
figure it out.
That's it. We hope you found it informative, Misfits. We hope you found that was a spicy one. That was a bit controversial, and I'm all for it. So that's been episode 8. Brody, do you know what's coming up for episode 9? Take a drink every time. Brody doesn't know what's coming up on the very next episode. And we talked about it before we came on, which is take a
and
double
it's
shot.
probably why I'm drawing a blank right now. I mean,
Right.
seriously.
So episode 9 is, how do you survive as the outsider? How do you, as a misfit? So in work, in relationships, at school, in life, if you're a misfit, you're more than likely the outsider. You're in the minority. So how do you stay sane? How do you stay healthy, and how do you make it work? Tyler, you strike me as a little bit of a misfit.
Oh my God, that's probably an understatement. I'm a huge outlier, but you know what they say? Every norm started as an outlier, right? So
Hey, set that trend. Brody, you've got any gems of insight going into episode 9?
I mean, try not
How
to
do you
punch
stay
people in
sane?
the face.
That's a good
Try not
start.
to punch people in the face. I mean,
That is a
that's
good
the
start.
biggest one. We'll segue this episode into the next. Just try not to punch people in the face. You'll probably end up with a little more sanity than if you do.
Nice. So that's been episode 8. We've been talking about violence. Thanks very much, Misfits. If you want to find more, if you want to get 2 weeks advanced access to all the episodes and all the things, you can go to promisfitspodcast.com and go find us at Camp Misfit. In the meantime, I've been Chris.
I've been Brody.
And he's been Tyler. We'll see you on the next one, Misfits. Stay classy.